Ravendia is a 5,000-year-old dragon who could have been the strongest of all dragons if it weren't for the fact that he is a complete and utter loser, who thinks like a dumb beta male and is a disgrace to his own race as he happens to be a vegetarian dragon and has the strength of a level 1 slime. The anime story kicks off within the capital city, where the city finds itself in a very dire threat. This is because the Demon King has threatened to destroy the city completely. Their war is relentless, and they fear losing their entire city to the Demon King in the long run. In their hour of desperation, there is no one they could run to for help except for an ancient figure, the Great Evil Dragon, who has lived on the outskirts of their city for an impressive 5,000 years. None of the city's members had ever crossed paths with this creature. However, their knowledge is shaped by myths and legends that portray the Great Evil Dragon as one of the greatest and strongest beings ever to grace the world. Amid a twist of fate, a bold decision is reached, an attempt to beg the Great Evil Dragon to come to their aid. The plan was simple, which was for them to send a sacrifice. The ruler of the city, the king, presents an orphaned young girl named Ryuko as the perfect offering. He grooms for this purpose. Ryuko, burdened with this task, goes on a journey into the ancient forest to awaken the sleeping dragon. Ryuko's arrival at the home of the Great Evil Dragon is a mind-blowing occasion. With respect, she kneels in front of the beast and wakes him up. She shares the tale of their suffering kingdom, pleading for assistance. In return, she sacrifices herself, begging the dragon to consume her. To her astonishment, the Great Evil Dragon reveals a truth, which is the fact that he is a herbivore and has no appetite for human flesh. In contrast to the reputation painted by the city's legends and myth, he is a timid creature who runs away from battles, which is why he has remained in isolation for several years. Ryuko, in disbelief due to the dragon's rejection of her sacrifice, begs to reconsider. She even goes as far as begging him to take a bite of her body to assess her suitability. The dragon, attempting to make her understand, insists on his refusal to consume humans. He reveals his diet of leaves and fruits as proof. Ryuko refused to believe it due to the several stories she had heard. She insists that the Great Evil Dragon is a fearsome force of destruction. The Great Evil Dragon earnestly attempts to convince her that he is nothing like the monstrous being that they had heard in the tales they had grown up with. Despite his efforts, Ryuko is undeterred. She makes her way to the other side of the forest. Thinking she had left, the dragon breathed a sigh of relief, only to hear her voice calling him back. To his surprise, Ryuko has settled amidst a bed of leaves, offering herself and the leaves as a sacrifice. He notices a great aura coming out of her and concludes she has the potential to be one of the greatest wizards if she survives that day's test. The dragon's patience wears out, and he begs her to return home, expressing concern that her family will be looking for her. Regrettably, she discloses that she was an orphan and returning alive would only result in her death because she is the only hope of the entire city. Faced with this reality, she even extends her offer to include her soul if the dragon finds her body unappetizing. The dragon's refusal pushes her to a desperate act. She draws a sword and prepares to take her own life so that the dragon can consume her soul. The Great Evil Dragon, realizing the need to deceive her so she can spare her life, develops a lie. He claims to have already consumed a part of her soul, leaving only her body behind. Ryuko accepts this story and pledges herself as his apprentice, willing to do anything for him. The dragon asks her to return home, but her city is far away, so the Great Evil Dragon, for the first time in 5,000 years, leaves his forest to accompany Ryuko back home. Along the way, they encounter other monsters, and the dragon relies on his great size to intimidate potential threats since he has no fighting skills. Finally arriving at the city, the Great Evil Dragon prepares for their hostility, but he is shocked to be welcomed with great honor and reverence. He tells the king that he has accepted their sacrifice and they need not send any other person to him. He promises to consider their request, although he knows he doesn't have any ability to fight the Demon King and he would have to find a new hideout to avoid the villagers. Before leaving, he feels Ryuko will continue to be maltreated if he leaves her in the city, so he lies to the villagers that the reason he is considering their offer is that Ryuko is a perfect sacrifice, so they should treat her well from that day. However, the prince, angry that the dragon has consumed Ryuko's soul, stones the dragon. He screams that he doesn't want Ryuko to die that way, and he even offers his soul as a substitute. He expresses that he prefers the Demon King destroy their city than see Ryuko dead. Ryuko, who believes she is now an apprentice to the dragon and needs to protect her master, warns the prince not to attack the dragon, threatening to take matters into her own hands if he does. As the great evil dragon prepares to leave, he hears an announcement that a new threat has emerged, and a pack of wolves entered the city. The dragon tries to scare them away with his body. He attempts to puff up and conceal his fear, but the wolves do not care about that, and they surround him. He cries because he knows there is no way he can defeat the wolves. To his surprise, Ryuko steps forward with her sword. She shows extraordinary combat skills, defeating the wolves in one attack. The dragon admires her great skills, declaring that she has the potential to be one of the greatest wizards he has ever seen in his 5,000 years. After the fight, Ryuko bows before him and pledges herself as his apprentice. After the confrontation with the wolves, the great evil dragon, Ravendea, returns to the city. Surprisingly, the people fear him even more, believing he is the one who has conquered the wolf pack. Ravendea realizes there is no one he could truly explain the situation to. However, he recalls the prince's kindness and concern for Ryuko and decides to tell him what Ryuko has become, hoping the prince will understand. When he explains the situation to the prince, he faces skepticism and doubt. The prince claims that the incredible power they had just witnessed can't be human and accuses Ravendea of trying to avoid responsibility for battling the Demon King by shifting it onto Ryuko. Their conversation gets heated, and the prince says unkind words to Ravendea. Ryuko, unable to tolerate the insults at her master, grows angry and contemplates killing the prince. Ravendea intervenes, reminding her that the prince is her friend. Ryuko counters, asserting that they aren't friends, as the prince has often driven her away from the palace, although the reason he has always done that is he fears for her safety. She describes how he will provide her with new clothes so she can escape, but upon her return, his father will beat him and endure beatings on her behalf and still attempts to send her away again. Ravendea understands the prince's actions come from a desire to protect Ryuko. Still, she insists that it is driven by the prince's desire for her fortune and hope to become the dragon's apprentice instead of her. She insists that if Ravendea won't allow her to kill the prince, she will at least steal from him. She enters the prince's room, and inside, she finds a dress he has kept for her over the years, a symbol of his enduring care. The prince promises to one day rescue her from the great evil dragon and hopes the dress will protect her. With Ryuko's preparations in the kingdom complete, she climbs onto Ravendea's back so they can leave to fight the Demon King. She develops a great skill called the Great Wing of the Evil Dragon, and she uses it to soar to great heights. Ravendea grows concerned, fearing they will fall, but Ryuko remains resolute. She intends to confront the Demon Lord immediately, prompting Ravendea to find a way to stop her. He suggests they needed to prepare for the confrontation, reminding her that he had been sleeping for 5,000 years. They must find a place to sharpen their skills before a significant battle. Reluctantly, Ryuko accepts his advice, and they set out to find a suitable location. And she finds the Paleodonor city. Ryuko shares her knowledge about the kingdom and the recent battle, but she omits a crucial detail, which is the fact that the city is currently engaged in a war against zombie flies. As they approach the village, Ravendea sees a bright light and assumes it is a thriving village, only to realize it is a fire when they get nearer. He gets frustrated with Ryuko for withholding this vital information, but she dismisses it, saying such a minor war is a little concern for a dragon like him. Upon their arrival at the village, soldiers mistake them for enemies and launch an attack. But Ryuko intervenes, defeating the monsters. When they come down, the warriors recognize the great evil dragon as Ravendea, and their leader, Alliant, comes forward to welcome him. Ravendea decides to help them, and Ryuko goes on a mission to fight the persistent zombie flies. Meanwhile, Ravendea discusses his suspicion with Alliant, suggesting that someone in a tower is manipulating the creatures to make them regenerate. He asks her to send her warriors to search high buildings or towers, aiming to end the war. Alliant acts on his advice, and Ryuko returns after successfully killing the flies. Ryuko wants to join Alliant in another battle, but Ravendea insists she rest. She falls into a peaceful sleep, and as he watches over her, he considers asking Alliant to look after Ryuko as a token of her gratitude so he can return to his forest. That night, Ryuko dreams about her father. Ravendea looks at her as she keeps screaming her father's name. Later, Alliant comes to meet Ravendea and appreciates him for the advice he has given her because she has already found the source of the zombies and has defeated him. She sees the way Ravendea likes Ryuko, and she admits that it is not like she has heard about him. She tells him she had heard that he is a very evil dragon who enjoys drinking blood and eating flesh and would do anything to get food. So, watching him take care of a human child is so unlike him. He reveals to her that he isn't like she is thinking. He is just a vegan dragon who can't cause harm to anyone, and all he does is live in the forest. She refuses to believe him because she assumes all that has been done in their city is his power. He confesses that everything is Ryuko's power. She isn't drawing any magical skill from him, and it is all hers. Just like everyone else, Alliant refuses to believe. She is of the opinion that there is no way a human child can wield that much power. He claims she may not be just a child, and she looks like a very great wizard. Alliant insists that although she has read in legends that there can be great wizards, but she hasn't met any of them before, and she doesn't believe any of them can exist in that world. She reminds Ravendea that even if she is a great wizard, as he has heard, it is possible that the great power she wields would consume her, and she would eventually become a dragon. Ravendea screams at that possibility, but Alliant calms him that it is just a theory that isn't real. She is still of the opinion that it would be risky if she is that powerful. He begs her to take Ryuko on her team and help Ryuko get better while he returns to the forest. Before talking about that, Alliant asks him why he is going against the Demon King. He tries to explain to Alliant that he doesn't even care about the Demon King and has no power to go against him. She refuses to believe him and claims she is one of the great sword masters of the Demon King, and the Demon King has asked her to kill him. She brings out her sword to kill him, but Ryuko wakes and attacks her. Although Ryuko has more magical skills, she is better with the sword, so she defends against all of Ryuko's attacks, and she eventually hits Ryuko. The young girl collapses while she goes to meet Ravendea. She asks Ravendea the question again, and when he refuses to answer her and gives her a correct reason, she comes at him the second time. This time, she stabs him. He assumes he is dead and screams but realizes that there is no blood anywhere. She reveals to him that the sword she uses can only inflict pain but can't kill. She keeps stabbing him with this sword, and he begs her to kill him instead. She eventually stops when she realizes he is weak. She advises him that he shouldn't tell anyone about his weak nature because if he does, many bounty hunters will come for his head since he has the second highest bounty in the world. He begs her regarding Ryuko, and she suggests how to dispose of the young girl. Before leaving, she asks him to tell Ryuko that the pain she felt was a dream. Eventually, Ryuko wakes and is glad to return to her master. However, Ryuko notices a significant change in Ravendea. He has shrunk and now resembles a lizard. She can't help but wonder what had happened to her master. Ravendea recalls Alliant's advice from the previous day that he should consume a potion to reduce his size to avoid drawing attention and protect himself and Ryuko. He struggles to find the right words to explain this transformation to Ryuko. He resolves to tell her that the reason he had reduced that much weight is because he had grown too large, and if he was to keep increasing in strength, he had to reduce in weight, which is why he decided to reduce. They pack their belongings and prepare to leave the city. On their journey, Ryuko remains troubled by what she thinks she witnessed the previous night. She insists that she had seen Alliant attack Ravendea. However, Ravendea does his best to convince her she has merely dreamt it. He reminded her of Alliant's kindness, how she had cared for Ryuko, provided her with a new weapon, and even cleaned her clothes. He tells her Alliant is a good person and Ryuko doesn't need to confront her. As they continue their journey, the citizens of Alliant's village work diligently to repair the damage from the attack. Suddenly, they receive an unexpected visitor, Aulode, the prince of Ryuko's village. He busts in, declaring his intent to find Ravendea and kill him to save Ryuko. Initially, the villagers assume he is a worker there to assist with the rebuilding. However, Aulode stands there, trying to explain to them that he is looking for the dragon. He doesn't know when a wall starts to fall, and the wall almost crumbles him. Alliant intervenes and stops the wall from reaching Aulode, rescuing Aulode. She informs him that he is too weak to save himself, let alone save anyone else, and suggests he return to his city. However, Aulode is determined to train rigorously and become stronger to rescue Ryuko, so he begs her to train him. Alliant warns him of the intense nature of her training but agrees to train him regardless. His training begins, but he quickly grows exhausted. Alliant gives him herbs to boost his strength but advises him to give up and return home. Meanwhile, in the forest, Ravendea spots a rabbit eating leaves. Hungry himself, he hopes to find suitable vegetation to eat. However, Ryuko mistakenly believes he wants to devour the rabbit. He pleads with her not to harm the innocent creature, explaining his herbivorous nature. Ryuko struggles to accept that her hero can't consume human flesh. He doesn't want to disappoint her, so he stays hungry. Suddenly, they are attacked by human traffickers. These criminals, underestimating Ravendea as a mere lizard, intend to kill him for rewards and traffic Ryuko. Though Ryuko is eager to fight back, Ravendea initially urges her to hold back. However, the traffickers' comments became unbearable for Ravendea. He finally permits Ryuko to defend them. She uses a gentle flick of her finger to send one of the traffickers soaring into the sky. Realizing their mistake, the men apologize. Ravendea asks about the whereabouts of their slaves, and the men take him there. Upon getting to their location, he releases all the captives. He instructs Ryuko to escort them to the nearest town. Reluctant to leave her master, Ryuko refuses, but she eventually accepts when he tells her that the task is part of her training. In her absence, Ravendea plans to find food for himself. He wanders the forest in search of edible leaves but falls victim to a starving monster that has been trapped under a cave. As the monster prepares to devour him, Ravendea screams Ryuko's name. The being walks up to him, but Ravendea runs away and tries to escape, but the being tells him to stop running, and Ravendea ends up triggering a trap and barely dodges a fleet of arrows. The being catches up to him and then says that it was telling him to stop because there were traps there, and then gives him an apple and tells him to eat it. It then gives him a bunch of other fruits as well, and Ravendea says that he mistook him for some evil monster, but it turns out he is actually a really nice guy. The being tells him that he sensed someone really strong and dangerous up there, and Ravendea says that it must be Ryuko. Even though she is really strong, she's just a human and is actually really nice. He then tells it that it must get really noisy with all the bandits there, but the being says that no one comes to him anymore because there's no treasure left there. It then starts crying and says that it wants to go outside but cannot. Ravendea asks why, and the being replies by pointing towards a painting on the wall that explains that it is actually the god of hunting in these lands, and long ago it descended there to teach the people of this land how to hunt. It soon started getting worshipped, but once people mastered their skills, they forgot about him and he ended up being all alone. He can only go out when he is training someone, and so he has been locked up here for ages. Ravendea feels sorry for the poor thing and says that he can teach him how to hunt, and this makes the god really happy. Ravendea also warns him about being really bad at learning things, but the god says that he believes that there is no such thing as a bad student, only bad teachers. He then takes out his whip and says that he will prove his superior teaching techniques by turning him into the strongest hunter in the history of everything in just under 3 hours. With that, he begins the first lesson, which turns out to be physical training. He says that having a strong body is crucial for hunters and orders Ravendea to give him 200 sit-ups. Ravendea says okay and lies down on his back, but ends up rolling on his side because of his scaly fins. He tells the god that he can't lie on his back and that his training methods don't seem to take into account that he is large and isn't a human. This makes the god really bothered, as he thinks that his training methods have never failed him in thousands of years, as he has taught humans this way all the time. Ravendea insists that he is a dragon and not a human and ends up failing the lesson. For the next lesson, the god tells him about balance training and makes him walk over a wooden bridge made up of a log. Ravendea says that it would collapse under his weight, but the god strikes his whip and tells him to man up and stop being afraid. With that, the evil dragon walks up on the log, and as predicted, it collapses under his weight and breaks up in two, making him fall on his draconic cake. This makes the god really bothered again, as he says that the bridge has never collapsed under the weight of a human before. He wonders what could be the reason for this, and then says that there's no gain if there's no pain, and repairs the bridge with his powers and makes Ravendea repeat the skit of him walking over it and then falling on his cake as the bridge breaks apart. After that, the god makes him go through a bunch of lessons like archery, pull-ups, making traps, and even chasing after a rabbit. But Ravendea successfully manages to fail them all and even gets his ass kicked by the rabbit he was supposed to chase. Finally, the god makes him go through an obstacle course where if he fails, he would get blown up by a dynamite. Ravendea wonders if the god works for ISIS, but then the effects of his potion starts to wear off and he returns to his original size and gets blown away. Later that night, the god gives up and wonders how it could be possible that this dragon didn't learn anything in 8 hours. He questions his own teaching career and starts panicking. He finally decides to give Ravendea some of his power, which lets him make his claws longer, and says that he has passed his training. After that, he swiftly returns to his cave and tells Ravendea to never tell anyone about him. Ravendea says that he doesn't plan to ruin his teaching career either and decides to wait for Ryuko to return till sunrise. The next morning, Ryuko wakes him up by greeting him and says that she successfully completed her mission. Besides that, she also gathered some information about a nearby city called Thrain, which doesn't seem to be protected by anything other than a water canal. She says that it would be a waste to leave such a city to be destroyed by the army of the Demon Lord and suggests that they should go and rule over it. With that, she sets their course for Thrain and makes Ravendea go there despite him not wanting to. They continue to travel towards the city and eventually get out of the forest to get an overview of Thrain. Ravendia also drinks some of the potion that he brought along from Paleodona City to make himself smaller again. And as they walk out of the forest, he takes in the view and thinks how beautiful it all looks when suddenly Ryuko shows him a paper and suggests that they send them a declaration of the evil dragon's dominion over the city. Ravendia shuts her idea down and reminds her that they shouldn't pick unnecessary fights with the humans, as he wants to form an alliance with them for the war against the demon lord, and then walks towards the city. He also says that there is no way that such a big city has no defenses, and Ryuko uses her special eye magic and confirms that the whole city is covered with a magical filter barrier that stops outsiders from getting inside without a pass. She further adds that it looks like the barrier was set up by a guardian named the Water Saintess. Ravendia compliments Ryuko for skipping the useless information this time, but then he suddenly hears the voice of a woman who says that the evil dragon is not welcomed in Thrain and tells him to go away. Ravendia tries to tell her that he's not an evil dragon, but she doesn't buy it and says that he can't fool her by turning into a small pet dragon and letting her disciple go about using all that dark magic. Ravendia tries to make his case still, but then the voice of the Water Saintess suddenly fades away, and the barrier around the city comes down. Ravendia looks at Ryuko and finds out that she used some of her magic to scare the Water Saintess away, which makes Ravendia even more worried about his future. They continue to walk into the city and notice the people staring at them with worry. Ravendia tells Ryuko to act as if they are part of a circus and makes her pretend as if she is a tamer and he is her pet dragon capable of speaking the human tongue. The people of the town feel relieved as they think that she must have come there after hearing about their festival, and say that if the Water Saintess let them through, then they must be good people. After that, they all go about their lives while one of the locals offers to show them around and helps them secure a room at a decent inn. He also tells them about the history of the town and how it used to be a barren desert until the Water Saintess arrived and used her powers of manipulating the earth and water to create rivers and infrastructure for this city. After they settle down, Ravendia decides to clear the air with the Water Saintess and tells Ryuko to stay put inside the inn on her own. He then walks around the city and asks everyone about the Water Saintess, but fails to find her anywhere. Eventually, he grows tired and thirsty and decides to fetch a mug of water at an inn, and the Water Saintess happens to be hiding inside that cup while being scared of the evil dragon. She rushes out and hides in a trough, but Ravendia ends up getting there as well. He seems to be avoiding the water in the river because of what he heard about it relating to the Water Saintess having cast a spell on the river which poisons anyone she thinks of as an enemy, like the demons and monsters. She runs away from there as well, and this continues until Ravendia doesn't have any other choice but to drink from the river. He sits beside it and hears his growling stomach when a bunch of kids approach him and offer to feed him an apple. He happily agrees, but then the Water Saintess comes out of the river in her human form and says that she won't let him eat the kids. He tries to explain himself, but she sends the kids away and says that she won't let him hurt anyone from her city. Ravendia looks at her and says that he doesn't want to destroy anything or hurt anyone and just wants to go back to his inn and have a nice meal. The Water Saintess looks at him and asks if he's being for real, and he says that he was looking for her so he could clear their misunderstanding and tell her to raise the barrier around the city again. The Water Saintess says that he has the wrong person and that she is just a simple girl, but she is sure that the Saintess would get the barrier up again in no time. She then takes him to the inn and tells him to go away tomorrow, and runs away pretending to be an ordinary girl, and miserably failing to keep her secret of being the Water Saintess. Ravendia walks inside and finds Ryuko going under sage training from Naruto, and he asks her what she was doing. She tells him that she was practicing stillness, and he told him to stay still in the room before leaving, but she still has ways to go before achieving the level of stillness that he expects of her. Ravendia says that he didn't mean anything so deep and tells Ryuko to take the next day off and go out to play with some kids her age and learn human customs. She says that she can't trust them because they are humans who worship a demon who's pretending to be a saintess, but Ravendia tells her that the Water Saintess must be a good person, and even she is worshipping an evil dragon like himself. After that, they both go to sleep and call it a night. Meanwhile, we see the right-hand man of the Demon Lord, a great dragon flying above Thrain alongside his shadowy partner. He looks at the city's barrier and says that it's practically useless and how their men failed to capture this city. The shadow with him speaks up and says that the barrier looks considerably weaker than the last time and wonders if something happened to the Water Saintess that protects this city. The dragon says that he will destroy the city tomorrow, as doing a sneak attack is beyond him, and prepares for the march. The next morning, the Water Saintess wakes Ravendia and Ryuko up by pretending to be a waitress who brought them breakfast. Ryuko instantly humbles her by smashing her face into the floor, which makes her splash some water around and shrink in size. She continues to insist that she is just an ordinary waitress and brought some vegetarian options for their breakfast, and reveals a pile of rotten vegetables that she picked up from the trash can on her way there. She seems to be tainting the evil dragon, which earns her another head slam by Ryuko before she turns into water and runs away like the coward she is. Ryuko looks fierce and ready to go after her, but Ravendia stops her and tells her to use her powers for good rather than picking meaningless fights. He then forbids her from using her powers for anything other than self-defense and gives her a taste of his talk no jutsu, where he teaches her how to be kind to others and motivates her by saying how he is proud of having her as his student. He then tells her to go outside and play with kids her age and says that that is her mission for the day. Ryuko says okay and runs out to fulfill her mission, while Ravendia decides to go after the water saintess to see what all that taunting was about. As he steps outside the room, his foot lands over a water puddle, and it suddenly drags him inside and into a deep body of water. It turns out it is the water saintess, and she is trying to drown him alongside her. Ryuko notices Ravendia's energy signal vanishing and decides to turn around, but then she finds some human kids and says that she should focus on her mission. She walks up to them and strikes a conversation, and they ask her about the little dragon. She wonders what they were talking about and comes to a conclusion that aside from great dragons like Ravendia, there are also little dragons that play with human kids. The kids say that they should play a game where they have to look for the little dragon, and Ryuko gets excited about it. Just then, the great white dragon of the Demon Lord's army breaks into the city and tells humans around him to prepare for the wrath of the Demon Lord, but Ryuko calls him out and says that he must be the little dragon that the kids were talking about and asks him to play with her. The dragon wonders what was up with this kid but decides to acknowledge her challenge and says that he can't overlook this rude behavior as a general of the Demon Lord's army. He says that he will play with her in all his seriousness and make an example out of her for whomever may try to go against the Demon Lord's army, but Ryuko simply chooses skip during his monologue screen and picks him up with one hand. She asks the dragon if he wants to play bounce the ball game with her and throws him forward in hopes of him bouncing, but he simply falls down pretty hard. This makes him really mad, and he decides to destroy the city with one ultimate move and flies up in the sky. As he prepares to charge his attack, Ryuko flies up behind him and asks if he wants to play on high ground. She then grabs him by his tail and swings him around like Goku and throws him back down. He still doesn't bounce as she hopes, which makes Ryuko really disappointed, and she proceeds to knock the living daylights out of him in the name of playing bounce the ball with the white dragon. Meanwhile, the shadow demon that came in with him manifests itself into a demon locust and says that he will have to take over this city on his own. On the other hand, Ravendia is still struggling with the water saintess trying to drown him in a water bubble, but Ryuko's energy waves make her lose control and they both end up falling inside a water space. As he falls down, Ravendia says his prayers, but then a shadow comes out of his claw and forms a small boat for him. The water saintess calls him a cheater and decides to drown him under a big wave, but his mist ship transforms into a balloon and makes him fly up. While this is happening, Ravendia takes a good look at the water saintess and confirms what Ryuko said about her and says that she is actually a demon from the Demon Lord's army. The saintess confirms and says that she just wants to save this city and its people even if she is a demon, and tells him to get off her tail. She then uses her ultimate spell, which uses all the water in Thrain and forms a seal around the evil dragon. She then starts absorbing his magical energy while choking him down, and Ravendia wonders how he will get out of it this time. Just then, the mist on his claw turns into the hunting god from earlier, and it turns out he was the one who saved his draconic ass earlier. He asks him for help again, but the god says that he has a policy of only helping his students twice and tries to explain what he must do to use this power for his own, but the water saintess magic makes the signals weak and Ravendia fails to listen to any of the important bits. She then continues to absorb his magical energy and ends up sucking the magical effect of the potion, and this transforms Ravendia back to his original form. The sudden transformation breaks the water seal spell and makes them both come out of the water fountain at the center of the city. The water saintess starts crying and says that she failed to guard the city and would return to the Demon Lord's army as Ravendia wishes, and begs him to leave the people of Thrain unharmed, but Ravendia explains that he doesn't mean any harm and was just trying to clear their misunderstanding, and that he actually is just a grass-eating lizard and not the evil dragon that she thinks him to be. He further encourages her to continue being the saintess of this city and says that she brought life and hope to its people, and tells her to avoid using that spell from earlier because the people of Thrain depend upon her water. Hearing all this makes the water saintess really happy, and she becomes friends with Ravendea, and they both part ways. But before leaving, Ravendea walks back and tells her to not call him a lizard in front of Ryako, as that would make her angry, but then he notices a demon locus on the saintess's head and wonders how a low-level demon managed to come inside with the barrier around the city. Just then, a dark aura surrounds her and the water in the area starts acting up, and it looks like the shadow demon took over the water saintess. The demon talks like a devil inside her head and makes her remember all the bad things that happened to her and how she is meant to be a water demon born to destroy humanity. All this whispering makes her use her powers of controlling earth and water, and she fills the area around her with mud instead of water. She says that she would drown the people of Thrain and turn them into food and regain her glory as a demon. She makes a tsunami of mud and directs it towards the people of the city, but instead of getting hurt and mad, they all start celebrating the occasion and thank the water saintess for bringing fertile mud to them. This makes them both surprised at first, but then the saintess forms a huge ball of mud and prepares to get rid of them for real, but Ravendea calls Ryako to come to him, and she instantly zooms through the mud ball and appears in front of him. He asks her what she was doing and if she behaved herself, and she explains that as told, she went to play with the human kids who told her to play a game of finding the little dragon. She found the white lizard and was playing with it until she decided to chop its head off and present it to the kids as a sign of her victory, but then she heard his voice and left everything and came here immediately. Ravendea wonders what the writers were fuming while creating Ryako, but then feels relieved that she at least protected the city from turning into a mud-covered pig pen. He then looks around for the saintess and finds her sitting in a pile of mud while crying herself out. He tells her that he will hear her out and it might help lighten her weight, and the saintess takes him up on this offer. She explains that a few hundred years ago, she joined the demon lord's army as a new recruit. She went to her seniors and asked for their guidance, but they all rejected her and called her weak due to her appearance. That's why she started roaming around on her own and came across a group of people walking through these deserts. She decides to appear in front of them in an adult form and prepares to drown them, but instead of running away from her, they start praising her and thanking her for the water. This makes her mad and she decides to use a mud attack, but this makes them even more happy as they find fertile soil, and they start worshipping her as their saintess. They ask her for permission to live in the land that she blessed, and over the years end up creating this bustling city called Thrain. She says that she liked being praised by people instead of being looked down upon, and decided to protect the city instead of destroying it. She says that she is a failure as a demon and this has been weighing on her soul. Ryako tells her to accept her defeat and hand the city over to the great evil dragon, but Ravendea shuts her down and says that she is a good girl and tells her that there's still a choice for her. Just then, a girl from the city walks up to her and tells her to stop crying and invites her to join in on their celebration, as she heard that the water saintess blessed them with fertile soil. Once she leaves, the saintess starts crying even more and says that the fact that they think she is helping them is in itself a mockery of just how big of a failure she is. Ravendea looks at her sorry face and gives her a head pat and asks her what she would rather be: a demon of the demon lord's army that brings destruction, or the water saintess of the people of Thrain. While she tries to calm herself down, the shadow demon inside her thinks that she is useless and concludes that Ravendea must be the strongest being there, considering how strong his disciple is, and gets inside him instead. The shadow starts roaming around his mind and tries to make him go mad with evil in his heart, but Ravendea shrugs it off as being overstressed and says that he must be really tired to be hallucinating in broad daylight. Just then, Ryako walks up and says that she finally understands why the evil dragon didn't want to rule over this city and made him play with human kids, and says that there is no way the great evil dragon would want to rule over such stupid people, who takes a pathetically weak and failure of a demon as their saintess and worships her. She then says that they should go away as the evil dragon doesn't want to rule over them, and Ravendea agrees despite wanting to stay, but thinks that it would be better for them to not cause any more trouble for the water saintess and the people of Thrain. As they get out of the city, the water saintess calls out to them and tells them to stop. She says that she promised the people that she won't make them cry ever again, and everyone is looking forward to the tamer to perform at the Thrain festival in 3 days. She asks them to stay until then and that they would get to enjoy a lot of tasty food if they do so. Ravendea agrees and says that they won't let the kids down, and tries to think of an excuse to tell Ryako, but she says that the great evil dragon doesn't have to explain his plan to her and simply follow him. Meanwhile, the shadow roams around inside Ravendea's mind and tries to find an evil memory of him so he can use it to take control of the evil dragon. While all this is happening, a scout from the Adventurers Guild walks inside Thrain and asks around about any anomalies that they might have witnessed recently. The old man says that he has come to the wrong city as Thrain is practically the name of peace, but the kid asks him about the repair work that was going on in the streets. The man says that it was just a performance done by the dragon which was with the performer, and it ended up bumping into some public buildings, and that's why they are repairing them now. The scout asks him about this dragon and where he can find him, and the man says that it has been roaming outside the city since yesterday, and points behind him at the great white dragon going through a trauma episode as it struggles with holding his identity as the great general of the Demon Lord's army and an obedient and submissive pet that Ryuko turned him into. The scout becomes worried and says that he must report it back to the guild, and later that night we see people gather around a poster in Paleodona City, where Alliant is still sadistically training Rado like the child slave he is. She makes him drag a huge boulder across the city, and after reading about a great dragon appearing in Thrain, she wonders what was going on and if Ravendia blew up his cover. She says that it can't be the evil dragon and says that she must go and find it out for herself, and tells Rado to continue with his training while she prepares. On the other hand, Ravendia and Ryuko walk around the city as the festival goes on, and Ravendia tries to sneak away and munch on some fodder in the sheep pen. He tries to get some for himself but loses to the sheeps miserably. Just then, one of the kids walks up to him with some fodder and treats him to a meal. He thanks her and starts shoving claw full of grass in his big mouth, but just then Ryuko passes by and Ravendia worries that she would realize that he isn't the great evil dragon and it would break the illusion in her head. He tries to act like a sheep and makes a baa sound. Ryuko looks at him and instead knocks on her head and says that she must be really tired to be confusing a sheep for the great evil dragon, and that this must be why the great dragon always tells her to get a good rest, and walks away. After that, the sheep surround Ravendia and snatch all the grass away. This is when the shadow finds an evil thought in Ravendia's mind where he once picked all the ripe apples from a tree for himself and didn't leave any for other animals, and this turns him into his evil form. With this newfound rage, Ravendia decides to fight the sheep for the grass but ends up getting his ass kicked still. This brings him back to his senses and he wonders what he was so mad about, but the girl tells him that he should come with her to meet the big dragon outside the city, and they can all go graze the pastures. Hearing this makes Ravendia confused as he doesn't know of any other big dragons besides himself and wonders what she was on about. With that, she promises to take him to meet the white dragon the next morning. The next day, Ravendia looks at the big white dragon and asks the little girl if he was the one with whom Ryuko was playing, and she confirms that. Ravendia wonders how all this happened and then walks up to him to introduce himself. He says that if Ryuko caused him any issues, he will have her brought here and they can apologize to him, but the dragon seems too traumatized and after hearing her name tells Ravendia to play with him instead like a little puppy. This is when the shadow demon takes control of him and uses this opportunity to make him go mad and unleash his true power. The white dragon goes insane and starts attacking Ravendia for real, but he lets out a scream like a piece of trash and calls Ryuko to his aid. Ryuko zooms in from across the city in under 3 seconds and knocks the big dragon away. The shadow demon confirms that Ryuko is the strongest person in the city and decides to take over her instead. He continues fighting her in the white dragon's body to make points of contact with her so he can switch bodies. After getting thrashed by her for some time, he finally manages to get inside her mind and prepares to take over her with his evil speech, but Ryuko turns out to contain a great evil within her that consumes the demon, making it wonder why such a strong being is following a useless dragon like Ravendia. While he gets devoured by her evil self, she remembers the time when she lost her parents, and we find out that once while traveling on a ship, they went through a rough storm and got attacked by some monsters. Her father tried to hold them off and saved everyone else but got left behind on his own. On the outside, Ravendia walks up to her and says that they should apologize to the big dragon for being violent, but then Ryuko starts screaming and suddenly unleashes a burst of energy that forms a massive crater around them. She then flies up and starts transforming into an evil demon dragon without any control over her powers. Just then, we see Alliant arrive in Thrain and say that this is exactly what she feared. She saves the Water Saintess and Ravendia, who are both being scared like spineless insects, and also saves the people of the city from turning into minced meat. She explains that Ryuko contains too much magical power for her size and that she has been keeping them sealed due to her good nature. But once that seal is removed, she will go berserk and turn into a mindless monster that destroys everything without reason. Just then, Ryuko speaks up and says that the Water Saintess has been rude to the great evil dragon and must pay the price with her life, and Ravendia confirms that it's something Ryuko would say. This makes the water saintess even more frightened, and she turns into a puddle of water while Alliant prepares to stand up against Ryuko with her sword. Ravenia thinks that they would be fine because she is strong, but then she tells them all to run and starts running away as well, saying there's no way she can take on a monster like her on her own. Ravenia says that there must be something they can do, and she asks why it matters to him as he wanted to get rid of her anyways, and this is a perfect chance for him to do that. He thinks about it for a moment but then stops and turns around to face Ryuko. He thinks back on all the memories that they made together and decides to bring Ryuko back to her senses. He grows up a pair for the first time in his life and starts running towards her as she throws a massive energy ball towards him. Ravenia tries to push it away but gets knocked back himself. He opens his eyes after a few seconds as Alliant calls him out and says that she might have a plan thanks to him. He says that he is so glad to have someone so reliable like her there, but then she grabs him by his tail and uses him as a shield and bat to knock back all the energy balls that Ryuko throws at them. She explains that even though Ryuko has gone crazy, in her mind, he is still the great evil dragon that must never be offended, and so all her attacks are harmless to him. Ravenia says that it's good and all, but she can't just be using him as a shield, and that they still need to bring Ryuko back to her senses. The Knight's commander says that she has a new plan and explains that if Ravenia comes in close physical contact with Ryuko, she might come back to her senses, and decides to throw him at her by grabbing him from his tail. Ravenia gets tossed straight into Ryuko's breath attack but gets blown away by all the garlicky wind due to his small size. Alliant says that there seems to be no other way around it, and perhaps they will have to sacrifice the water saintess and make a run for it, but this makes the saintess turn into a JoJo character as she votes against this plan. Just then, Ryuko starts turning into a dragon demon and things look bad. Alliant says that if this continues, the transformation would become permanent, and this worries Ravenia as well. He makes up his mind and says that he has a plan and asks Alliant to hold Ryuko off until he is ready. He then asks the water saintess to suck the potion magic from within him so he can turn back to his original size. Meanwhile, Ryuko attacks them up front and engages in an epic fight against Alliant. She holds her off with her masterful swordsmanship but eventually ends up at her limits as Ryuko prepares a big ball of pure energy and throws it at her. Just then, Ravenia manages to slingshot himself using the shadow in his claws that he got from the hunting god and the white dragon's wings and blasts through Ryuko's attack to shut her down. After that, we see Ryuko remembering what happened after the storm and how they landed on the shore. The people branded them as monsters for their powers, and her father told her that he believes in her, and even though she will face many difficult challenges in her life, she will overcome them as his daughter, and then he closes his eyes. Back in the real world, Ryuko comes back to her senses and wakes up in Ravenia's claws. He tells her that she has been really clumsy this time and should come with him to apologize to everyone while showing her the destruction around them. She agrees and stands up to meet up with the water saintess and Alliant. The saintess says that the city wasn't harmed and that they will still have the festival, so they should stay. Alliant agrees as well, as she won't be able to go back to her city before nightfall, and they all go on to celebrate the festival. And this is how season 1 of A Gentle Dragon of 5,000 Years Old. It was recognized as an evil dragon without any cause comes to an end.